Welcome back, everyone, to Canadian Agriculture Unpacked, brought to you by Footprint. We have two guests with us today, but before we go there, let me just remind you that our contact information is on the screen. Please avail yourself of that if you've heard about an issue you'd like to talk about, if you'd like an issue that on this show that we should be talking about, or even if you would like to appear as a guest on this show. I also want to tell you that for this show, we will provide a link for you that'll take you to a site with a Canadian and U.S. map that specifies on a state-specific and provincial-specific basis the reciprocal trade in agriculture between the two countries. If that link does not work for you, just Google it. Google Canada-U.S. reciprocal agricultural trade, and you will be brought to that site. Anyway, welcome to the show, gentlemen. I've got Wayne Easter back again. Of course, he's a longtime member of Parliament from 93 to 2020, I believe. Former Canada top cop as Solicitor General under Prime Minister Paul Martin, and most recently, before he retired, chair of the House of Commons Agricultural Committee. Then we have one of his parliamentary buddies, NDP Member of Parliament Charlie Angus. He's been there, well, he's still there, but he ran a little bit later than Wayne Easter did. I believe you ran in 2004, Charlie, is that correct? And
Yep.
He's still a Member of Parliament. I got to know him when he was agricultural critic for the NDP party for a while. Got to know him as someone that works really hard, as does Wayne Easter. In fact, I think the two of them probably work together very hard on agricultural issues. Charlie has also done a fair bit of advocacy work in the U.S. and in Canada on the ongoing chaos created by our friends across the border. I think I can still say friends, probably, with somewhat of a caveat, Charlie, I don't know. Anyway, gentlemen, welcome to the show. Here we are. We've been through a lot. A month ago, we were threatened a 25% tariff. Then they put it on pause. On Monday at midnight, the 25% tariff came on. Yesterday, I heard the Commerce Secretary say, well, he thinks maybe Trump would be willing to meet in the middle, which makes no sense to me. I mean, look, we have almost $73 billion in reciprocal agricultural trade. If we put a 25% tariff on everything, it's a wash. So why not leave it at zero? We have open, very integrated borders between Canada and the U.S. But anyway, that's where we are. Charlie, what do you make of all of this?
Well, I think what we've watched is something unprecedented. You know, we remember when the Berlin Wall fell, and at the time it seemed the Soviets, it was a monolith. It would be there our whole lives. It took 6 months from the protests in Berlin to when that wall fell. And then afterwards we all said, well, of course it had to fall. It was crushed under its own weight. I think we're watching a moment in history equally significant. We're watching the great American century disintegrate before our eyes. And it's disintegrating because Donald Trump has, in 60 days, has burned through his alliances with Europeans, trashed America's reputation on the world stage as a global leader. The attack on President Zelensky, I think, is one of the most sickening things anyone's ever seen. The fact that he votes with North Korea and Russia, I mean, at a time that would have been, an American who did that would be a traitor. And now he's going back to trying to destroy the greatest trade relationship in the world. To what end? It will leave America more isolated, more vulnerable. And I actually don't know, and I don't want to give anyone any false hope, but I don't think Donald Trump can pull this thing off. Well, he's not going to pull it off destroying us as a nation. But what's the damage, even if he backs down now, in terms of people are second-guessing trade, there's now second-guessing investments. This is a dumpster fire that's happening south of the border. We just got to keep those oily, smelly clouds from that dumpster fire from crossing over into our country.
Well, you know, before I go to Wayne, it strikes me that, I mean, what he keeps saying is he wants more manufacturing in the U.S. Of course, the reason why the U.S. has a trade deficit is because a lot of the American companies built in other countries and imported American products, really. They're American products because they're owned by American companies, and their consumer, of course, started relying on lower prices as a result of that. But it seems to me that a lot of companies, I'm thinking even in agriculture, say processing companies, say hog grower barns, et cetera, rather than reconfigure, I think they may just hunker down and wait for this to blow over because we know that this is not going to last forever. Wayne, what are your comments?
Well, much the same as Charlie's. Really, I agree with everything he said. But, you know, the United States was a leader in the world in terms of democracies and what they're all about. And now we're seeing the direct opposite from the U.S. They are undermining democracy. They're undermining trade agreements. The trade agreements with Canada and Mexico, Trump signed it. And Trump said at the time it was the best trade deal ever signed. And here he is now doing everything. He's breaking every agreement he ever signed on to. And I just want to re-emphasize what happened with President Zelensky in the Oval Office. That was clearly an ambush to try and, undermine basically Zelensky in everything that he's been doing. And Trump absolutely lies. Let's look just at the trade deficit. He calls trade deficit alone. It's actually us that subsidize them on trade in goods and services, excluding energy. They have a surplus. And when you add in energy, our oil going to the United States for the last 15, 20 years, because we're captive to the U.S. market, has what we call an Alberta discount of an average of $15 a barrel. So they're getting discounted oil from Canada. That's a subsidy to them from Canada, and yet Trump claims that they're subsidizing Canada. They're not. He's a very dishonest man. I mean, I think there's something wrong with the guy, actually. But where will it go? I don't know. I think the world is in trouble. The point, and I want to emphasize again, that Charlie said, that vote at the United Nations for the United States to support, to be on side with Russia and North Korea, never been heard of before. The United States was a leader for the free world, and here they are now supporting or siding with dictatorships. But what made me most angry last night when I was watching the speech in Congress by President Trump was how Republicans that I know and have known for quite a number of years could stand and applaud some of the things that President Trump was saying. It's a really sad commentary on what's happening in the U.S.
Yeah, just full disclosure, Charlie, and you may know this, one of the reasons why Wayne didn't like that fiasco in the Oval Office is because he's trying to grow potatoes in the Ukraine, so he's got additional interest there. You know, I mean, the other thing that I found interesting is, of course, when Trump announced the tariffs, he basically looked farmers in the eye in the press conference and said, have fun. And then turned around and announced a $30 billion subsidy for farmers. Well, how are farmers going to have fun if they have to rely on $30 billion in government support? But I also heard after that, the White House switchboard was lit up from farmers calling the White House saying, what is going on? We don't want this. Charlie, go ahead.
Well, I think this is the question, and you know, certainly we're going to see if this thing goes on and we start putting the trade pressure on potash, the American agricultural community is going to be in a tailspin. But none of this makes sense. He talks about aluminum, for example, how unfairly subsidized Canadian aluminum is. Well, the only reason Canada has an advantage is because Quebec has public hydro, and most of the cost of aluminum is electricity. So is Donald Trump going to say that all those private energy suppliers in the United States are going to start giving a deal on aluminum? They're not. If you're going to decide you're going to become an aluminum producer, okay, so maybe you can, but that's going to take years. It's the same as in auto. I've been told from people very close to the industry that within 4 days, even if we don't put reciprocal tariffs back on, Lansing, Michigan goes down, Toledo goes down, Bowling Green goes down. I mean, auto drives the central North American economy. There is no way that you can pull that integrated market apart without causing maximum chaos and hurt. So what's the point? And I think that this is the thing that we have to focus on. I know for our ag listeners, I mean, you guys live by very narrow margins, so you're going to be focused very closely on what this means to you. But the larger Canadian response, I think, is not to get caught down these rabbit holes with Donald Trump. He's a disinformation king. We have to stay strong as a nation. I'm very, very sure right now and very proud of how the Canadian people are taking up their share of this fight. I think average Canadians are the leaders in this fight through the boycotts that are happening. And, you know, I've had media say, well, what does it mean if someone doesn't go to Arizona or someone doesn't buy Kentucky bourbon? When enough Canadians start shifting their buying habits, that's when the governors start calling Donald Trump. And regardless of whether he chokes this week or tomorrow he comes up with a deal, we know that over the next 4 years, we're going to be tested like we've never been tested before. And what I worry about is that our producers are, you know, whether it's in ag, whether it's in auto supply, whether it's in any of our manufacturing sectors, they're having to live right now on pins and needles. So the rest of Canada has to step up. The rest of Canada is stepping up. We're all in this together, and that's what makes us unbeatable, because the Americans are not all in it together. They are a very divided country, a country with more division and rage and uncertainty than anyone could have ever imagined the United States would end up being.
Yeah, and you know, because everybody's gone to just-in-time delivery, the impact is going to hit a lot quicker than what it typically would have before, right? So they will immediately, talking to a grocery retailer in the U.S., he said, look, in a couple of days, my prices in produce are going to go up. I import from Mexico, and they will go up in a few days. And that's the inevitability about it. We were talking to Dennis Laycraft, the Executive Vice President of Canadian Cattlemen, last week, and he talked about the integration in the industry, but also the potential cost to the industry. And I agree, it's going to hurt. But you know, if you look, and you were talking about small things adding up to a lot eventually, and if you look at the map that I referred to earlier, there are billions and billions of dollars from the states being exported into Canada, and it's going to hurt them locally very hard in the U.S. Overall, I mean, the administration might look at it in aggregate and say, well, how much pain is it really? But it's really going to come down on communities, I believe. Wayne,
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Well, I think it's either 32 or 34 states that we're the number one trading partner with. And when you look at the trade between us and the United States, so many of our industries are really completely now integrated, and that was to create efficiencies in the system. It showed the trade agreements were actually working. There's efficiencies on the Canadian side, there's efficiencies on the American side, and that way in North America and the Mexican side, although I do have a concern about the low wages in Mexico, but in any event, that cooperation has meant that better efficiencies in the system and a greater ability for Canadians, Americans to be able to buy certain products, whether it's automobiles or whatever it might be. I mean, a car, before it's finally manufactured, goes across the Canada-U.S. border, it's either 7 or 9 times. You know, some of the work's done in Ontario, and then it goes down to the U.S., and then it comes back. I know it sounds crazy, but it's the most efficient way and the cheapest way to manufacture that automobile. So it's really greatly integrated. But the just already on the tariffs that Trump put on yesterday, cows are off, cattle are off in Quebec. That's not beef cattle, but beef cow or dairy cows and beef cows. They're off 70 cents a pound. And that would be about, they'd be down somewhere around 15 to 18% on the price of the cattle. JBS in Pennsylvania, who buy a lot of Quebec cattle, had to come up with a big check yesterday to pay for the tariffs for cattle they had already bought that happened to be delivered yesterday. So that's some of the consequences. So that's a real hit to producers and to processing plants as well.
Well, I think this makes, look, it appears to me that any trade agreement that the U.S. has, they're basically all blown up, right? I mean, our CUSMA is blown up. I can't imagine the U.S. is going to cooperate at the WTO, which makes all our plurilateral and bilateral trade agreements over the last 7 years even more important. When I was a hog producer in Manitoba, I believe 80% of our exports back then went to the U.S. Yesterday I read that out of Manitoba, they only export 40% of their exports to the U.S., and the rest they diversified their export markets. And so I think that's really good. The other thing I find interesting is all the noise around what's going on. And I mean, people are blaming, for example, when it comes to groceries, people are blaming Biden for the high egg prices or the shortage of eggs. Some people are blaming Biden, others are blaming Trump. Of course, we all know it really has to do with the avian influenza in the U.S., but they're using that as leverage to try to make their point. And I found it interesting. Yesterday, the agricultural secretary from the U.S. was encouraging people to get backyard chickens for their eggs, which of course we know could exasperate the very reason why there's a shortage of eggs, which is avian influenza. And so a lot of this noise just isn't doing the consumer and those people that are involved and the employees that are going to be hit any good. There's just so much noise, Charlie. What do you make of that?
Well, I was just at the Prospectors Developers Association gathering in Toronto, which I'm at every year. I mean, the whole world comes to Toronto in March. If you want financing for a mine in Kazakhstan, Guatemala, Arizona, you're coming to Toronto. So, here we have Donald Trump saying there's nothing Canada has that Americans need. Well, they need capital, and the capital comes out of Toronto, Vancouver. And it was really interesting talking to the industry because these are hard-nosed business dudes. Mining is a tough business. And I had a really interesting series of conversations. The big boys, they're saying, we have it written into our agreements. You throw on a tariff, you pay the price. So the big companies in mining are going to weather it. The medium size are telling me, well, they expect that they're going to outlast Trump. But last year, the whole place was buzzing because of Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, the whole critical minerals sector. There was such a move towards integration again with the EV markets, with batteries. Canada was going to be a major supplier. Now Trump's talking about throwing tariffs on copper. I mean, I'm sorry, how is America's manufacturing sector going to run, paying tariffs on copper? We produce copper. The global south produces copper. Americans don't produce copper. It's the same on the critical minerals front. They're picking a fight with China, which is the world's major holder of critical minerals, and now they're picking a fight with Canada, which the plan had always been was that Canada would be the alternative so they didn't have to depend on China. So I think it's this chaos factor is really about isolating America. I don't know. I mean, how is it possible to think of Trump is anything but Vladimir Putin's stooge. He's isolating America. He's driving down the economy. He's creating uncertainty. But for Canadians, we need to decide what we are going to do. And I think that that's the thing, is to keep focus on. As you talk about diversifying markets, I'm seeing Canadians now who, at the grocery stores, they're looking at the greens. And so much of those greens come up from the States. Well, we actually now have small producers in my region in Northern Ontario who are producing greens through greenhouses and that. There's a market there. Canadians will pay more to defend our nation. That's what I'm hearing from people. They will pay to defend our sovereignty. So we're going to have to start looking at diversifying these markets. We could get our critical minerals to Germany. Germany would take it in a second. We could start looking more to Europe. Europe is looking now as well to diversify because they can't trust the United States. So America is going to be more isolated. It's up to us as a nation to decide how we're going to go, because we can't just hope for the best and say, well, we'll get through this crisis. The crisis is ongoing with the United States.
So do you guys think that there is going to be a reconfiguration of our integrated industries, or do you think they're just going to hunker down and wait for the storm to blow over? Say weanlings going into Iowa and soybean coming back to Canada. Will they just wait? Like, maybe they'll give their barns a rest. Who knows? But do you think there will be a massive reconfiguration?
I don't know whether it'll be massive, but I think people are starting to move down that road, because there's no other choice. Look, it's unbelievable how all trust in the United States has been broken so quickly. I mean, you just can't trust the administration, and you can't trust the Congress. I've talked to some of them down there on the Republican side and the Democratic side, and for me personally, I've just lost all trust and faith in the American system. I mean, we built trade agreements that have really produced good results, and now the rules under the trade agreement mean nothing to Trump. The WTO decisions will mean nothing to Donald Trump. He's a fellow who doesn't believe in a win-win situation. He believes in win-lose, and he has to be the winner. But Charlie's absolutely right on what do we do in our own country to move forward. And Canadians are voting with their wallets. When you go into a store, people are picking up the jars, looking, is that from the United States? And if it's from the United States, they're not buying it. And so we're going to have to stand together. It's going to be tough times. Federal and provincial governments are going to have to stand with Canadians and support the public and Canadian businesses in every way they can.
Charlie, you like Gordie Howe on this one. Give us the Gordie Howe analogy.
Well, Mike Myers, a good boy from Scarborough. I knew all the Myers boys. When he went on Saturday Night Live the other night with the Canada Not For Sale t-shirt, it sent such an amazing message. It was electric, but it was at the end when they were doing the closing thing, and Mike Myers was mouthing to the American viewers who probably didn't get the message, but he mouthed elbows up. And that, of course, is Gordie Howe. This is elbows up time. And I've been hearing it. They were apparently at the American Embassy yesterday chanting elbows up. When I was at Prospectors Developers, when I was walking down the hall, people were putting elbows up and shouting to me, elbows up. I think we're being unified as a nation. I think this is actually, for the darkness that we're in, it's been a really amazing thing to remind us that Canadians, push come to shove. It's the Juno Beach gene. It's in us. And Wayne and we've quietly whispered our frustration at our federal bosses over the years. I don't know if the federal government understands yet how much we're going to have to do to retool to make Canada the country that we're going to be in 2026, 2027. Canadians are there, but this is going to be a major moment of change. It's going to be hard, but we're Canadians, so elbows up.
Elbows up is right. Yeah, well, and I apologize that Wayne is no longer in the house for you to throw things at him.
Oh God, they used to, the people around us used to sit and like shake their heads when Wayne and I used to just goad each other. We sat beside each other. Hey, Wade, remember we used to just goad each other the whole time.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun, but I think where both Charlie and I come from, neither one of us has ever forgot where you come from.
Yeah.
Too many in Ottawa have. They get up there and they think they're in the big leagues, and now they're important.
Yeah.
As I always said, people ask me, how could you be there 28 years? I said, well, the key thing is never ever forget where you came from. And number two, don't take yourself too seriously. And that's proved well for me over time, and Charlie's right in this point too. The people around prime ministers and around leaders of the opposition and third party, these folks come around them and they somehow lose touch with the reality on the ground. And Canadians are where they are right now on their feelings towards the United States and how they're operating, and the government of Canada and the political system in Canada, from the top down, has to join those Canadians and make sure the governments support them.
Well, you two gentlemen always fought really hard for agriculture. There's absolutely no doubt about it. And of course, you know that when you visit or when you go talk to MPs on the Hill, you can always tell who's there just to fill a chair and who's there to really, really do the work. Do you guys think that the government has enough, provincial and federal, enough money to tide us over, to help unemployed, to help if there's a serious impact in agriculture? Is there enough money to get us through this?
Well, we got through COVID, which was extraordinary. We had to shut the entire economy down. I think what we're having to look at now is a different kind of major COVID investment. It's about retooling. It's about trying to find how do we sustain our region so no region is left behind. But we're going to have to start retooling our economy, and we're also going to have to retool our defense. And it's not about the 2% NATO. It's about actually being able to defend our waterways and our borders, because we have now a potential malignant threat on the largest unguarded border. That's going to be the tough conversation. And again, as Wayne and I know, the people around our leaders love slogans. They love pithy message box talk, and they think people don't want to hear hard news. I think Canadians aren't afraid of hard news, but we need to be able to talk about what it's going to cost to get us through this. And that might be, in some areas, EI, if plants have to shut down for a time, but it's about retooling and rebuilding and changing our markets, because we can't trust our neighbor anymore.
Yeah, it is, Bob, it is very far different from COVID. COVID was basically, and a lot of money was put out to sustain people and businesses so they would be there when COVID is over. In this situation, it's going to be all about investing in our businesses and our people to basically lessen our dependence on the United States and do what we can within Canada in terms of our own domestic markets. That means better internal trade rules, and some of these barriers between provinces will have to come down. Expanding our trading relationship with Europe, selling more products to other countries around the world, so diversifying our trade away from the United States, because we're going to be in this for the long term. So it's all about investment that's going to make a difference to Canadians and to Canadian businesses.
Well, it's been particularly uplifting to see the solidarity between countries, Europe, Canada, and whatever. That is really great to see. All right, gentlemen. You have one last message for farmers, Charlie.
Well, let's not sugarcoat it. We're in for a rough patch ahead, but we're going to get through, because we've always gotten through, and we're Canadians, and we're going to have each other's backs. And one thing I notice at the grocery store, if it's Canadian produce, Canadians are buying it, and Canadians will continue to buy it, because we understand you can't be left out there on your own at this time. We're going to have to do this together.
Wayne.
Much along the same lines, the firm community, the governments at all levels have to be there to support you. We are, as a nation, more dependent on trade than a lot of nations are because we produce so much. So it's important for the governments to diversify those markets so that farm produce can get to market. But farmers are going to have to stick together. Canadians are going to have to stick with them. And it will be. There will be a rough patch here. There's no question about it. But governments have to be there for your industry, and that industry will survive because we've got some of the most efficient farmers in the world. The farm community, unknown to most consumers, is always at the cutting edge of technology. GPS equipment on tractors, on sprayers, on combines, computer feeding systems for beef cattle, hogs, and poultry, automated dairy systems within the dairy barns. So we have to keep on creating efficiencies and supporting the industry.
Well, there you have it, from a former dairy farmer from Prince Edward Island and from a former musician. I forget the name of the group.
I'm not former. The Grievous Angels are back on the road.
Oh, good for you. Congratulations.
Good for you, Charlie.
The last note goes to you. Do you have a message for Trump?
Well, Donald, I don't know. You're already huffing and puffing and getting out of breath and saying you might cut a deal. But listen, Donald, a tariff is a tariff is a tariff. We don't meet in the middle. We meet when you stop threatening us, and then we'll sit down.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, and thanks for your ongoing dedication to farmers and to agriculture. To the viewer, our next show is going to have as a guest Dr. Rasmussen from Vito in Saskatoon, and we will be talking about avian influenza. Thank you, everyone.
Elbows up.
Take care, guys. Take care. Keep up the fight, Charlie.
Thanks
You
a lot,
too.
guys.
Bye-bye. Bye.